Hello everyone, welcome to my beginners drawing class series, and today I'm going to share with you about notional space. So whenever we start drawing, we either draw from a photo reference or a real object. So such as this is a real object and this is our photo reference. So these are the two ways we start our drawing practices, and most of the time we use this photo reference, which is actually not a 3D object. There isn't any z dimension to it. So this photograph is actually already converted into a 2D space, into a 2D x and y values. So there is no depth. So when we draw with x and y value, it makes it easy for our brain to coordinate between eyes and hand movements. But when it comes to a 3D object, which is a real life object, it gets difficult because there is a z value to it, a value. So there's a x value, there is a y value, and then there is a z value, depth. So this depth creates an issue, and it really makes things complicated for us to have our eye, what we see, and when we draw, coordination between our eye and hand. And to develop that eye and hand coordination, we need to use few tools to make our life easy to represent this 3D object into a 2D form. So let me share my screen with you and show you how to find a notional space for this mark. To draw notional space, we need to have a width and height ratio. For that, you can use, if you're drawing it from live, you can use your chopstick or a pencil to measure it. And I'm currently going to show you in a software, so I will draw using the software tools. So once we got the width and height ratio after measuring it, then we will draw a rectangular container around this cup. Once we have this rectangular container drawn, that's actually a notional space. So that rectangular container has to be from edge to edge, so from top to bottom and side to side, the entire frame around it, and that space, that this rectangular frame, is called notional space. And after we got this notional space, we need to find a center point for this object. And to find a center point for this object, we need to draw diagonal lines and both sides, and now we have a center point. After we got a center point, now we can divide this whole notional space into halves. So now we have divided this whole rectangular notional space into 4 quadrants, and this gives us a smaller section to measure this cup from edge to edge, from top to bottom. This also helps us to see the negative space around it, the shape of the negative space, and also help us what angle in relation to the notional space line the edge of the cup is. So now let's see another use of our notional space, how it can benefit us. So this cup is actually made of many different shapes, and if we see, we divide this, the top part of it is actually an oval, and the middle part of it, then the second shape, is actually a rectangle, and then there is a sphere in it, and which is truncated and cut it in a half, which is blending with the rectangle. And then at the bottom there are actually triangle, those lines going downward, which is creating a curve. It's actually a triangle. And then we have another oval. So now we have divided this complicated shape into a smaller, simple geometrical forms. And once we have that, we can train our eyes to see which is the darkest area of this object and which one is the lightest part of this object using this all four quadrants, and this help us to see the midtones, dark tones and light tones and highlights. It makes our life way more easier to render this 3D object. Now let's find out the notional space of this apple and the angles in relation to the notional space, diagonal lines and the negative spaces and different shapes and forms. So now let's look at this composition's notional space. First, we will draw a notional space of these two apples. So once we have divided the notionals, each apple with its own notional space, we can compare and gather information, the distance between two apples, and we can have angles, the negative and positive space. Then we can draw diagonal lines for individual notional space, which will further divide this piece into a smaller chunk and will also help us to observe relationship between one apple to the another. So now let's quickly look at this flower, and we will draw a notional space around it. In this case it's a square, and we will find a center point by drawing diagonals, and we will further divide one of the quadrant to find out more about the angles and relationship between each petal, and also more about the negative space around these petals in between space. The more we divide it, the more information we will gather from it. So just now you saw that how to draw a notional space and how to find a center point for your shape of the notional space using a diagonal lines from one corner to another, and how dividing this complicated shape into a smaller areas, it helps us to define relationship between different angles, between different positions, and between different forms. And it will take actually a bit longer to develop your eye to see those invisible notional space when you're drawing it. Right now what we did is we drew it on top of an object, and that's what we are going to do when you're going to draw. We will use these pencils to measure our object width and height relationship to find the ratio of the rectangle or the notional space. Or you can use these viewfinders, which I have created using some waste box, and this really help us to close your one eye and then look at your object using this viewfinder, and have it at different sizes. Like I have one square, one rectangle, and it helps you to see your object within a notional driver. Soon you will, if you keep practicing this, soon you will develop a very very good understanding of the invisible notional space, and you'll be very fast sketching it out of your real life object into a notional space, and then using diagonal lines you will find a center point and relationship between different angles and position, and also on many forms which exist in the complicated object. I hope this was helpful. If you like it, please subscribe to my channel, and if you use this notional space in your artwork, in your drawing practices, do share your images and how you're using it with me in a comment. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day. Bye.